I'm hoping my phone has enough memory to just keep recording. I bought the 128, but now I'm up to like 5-hour-long videos. So we'll see.
Did we have any
Not for today. You will have more for next week. No. No, like I said, you're not going to get assignments every week.
Yeah. So it felt like I had something due, but
basically how this works is everyone just gets a check for handing it in, and then I might have wrote questions on there, which is kind of things to think about, or tried to somewhat edit your writing style. Here you go. That's probably mostly what I did, is try to edit writing style, because a lot of what I found was that there was like statement without reason.
okay. But like, what does it say here?
Oh yeah. My handwriting's also terrible, so if you have questions, that's fine. Oh, where did I put yours? Did I hand? Oh, I handed it to you. It came in. Oh, no.
Not right.
That's a no.
Okay.
If the multiplier increases, then the money supply increases.
Oh, okay.
Because we're holding the monetary base
But these
constant.
are just check marks, right?
Yeah, they're just check marks. The other thing was something I wanted to make a comment about, because I think I've made a comment about this before, is with like question 6, well, the hardest part about these questions is to remember that question A and question B are separate questions. Like, it's not, you don't create a scenario from B with your answer from A unless it explicitly tells you that. But I don't think anyone really did that. But in general, everyone did well with their analysis and things like that. Like I said, it was mostly just writing style. One thing that I thought was interesting, and I am going to shout some people out here on this, is 4 of you decided to do just analysis based on thought and trying to think about it. 2 people actually did the math, so thank you. Because that's the only way you can prove something, is if you do some math. And someone even wrote in their answer, you would have to do math to say this is true. Well, then you can do the math. But, so I thought it was funny that that's how it kind of broke down. But so anyway, today's lecture is on the open economy. This is the lecture that Bella wanted to be here for, but she's going into the city with the rest of the team. They're going to be presenting their findings about capacity utilization at the Eastern Economic Conference tomorrow, actually, which is kind of exciting. But so that being said, this is definitely one of the longer chapters in the book, which is probably not exciting to hear at 4 o'clock on a Thursday. So we'll just kind of jump into it. So when we talk about an open economy, one of the things we have to talk about is international flows of capital goods. This is basically investing in other countries. So key factors that a country's spending in an open economy does not necessarily equal all the goods and services produced. Like in the United States, though, our net exports is negative. So let's say we're going to use China. Their net exports is positive. So basically, they export more than they produce in their country, essentially. What?
Import, right?
If their net exports are positive, their exports are positive. So they're exporting more than they're importing.
Yeah, no, you said that, then they're producing.
Oh, okay.
They're producing more than what they're, consuming. Sorry, consuming was the word. So they're producing more than they consume in their economy, so they send goods out. So here we're going to talk about the role of net exports. So again, you'll see what we're going to have eventually is the C plus I plus G plus NX. But in a closed economy, everything that we produce, we sell in that closed economy. So we don't have to worry about exports because they don't exist. So expenditure will only be divided again amongst government purchases, investment, and consumption. But now we've introduced this fourth component, which is exports. So what we're going to have now is our new identity, which is C plus G plus I plus X, where the D here represents domestic, not demand, which I know can be confusing sometimes, because last time I said we talk about D and S's in demand and supply, but here we're talking about domestic. So the sum of the first three is going to be the domestic spending on domestic goods and domestic services, where X is foreign spending on domestic goods and services. Okay? Does that make sense so far? So, if we have our original identity, C plus G plus I, now we can break that all up into different components. We have domestic consumption plus foreign consumption of domestic goods, domestic government spending plus foreign spending on domestic goods, and then we have domestic investment plus foreign investment in the United States. But so we can substitute this all and move things around because we still haven't lost all of our identities from math. So we still have our commutative property, bless you. So we do a little bit more, substituting. So we get Y equals C plus I plus G plus exports minus our imports. So exports minus imports, that's going to give us our net exports. So that's that equation that everyone's already kind of learned. This is just how we build it. So if output exceeds domestic spending, we export the difference. Otherwise, we're going to import. Because if you're spending that money and the goods aren't there, that means you have to get them from somewhere else. That just kind of makes sense at that point. So then we have international flow, capital flows in the trade balance. Oh, is this still part of the same thing? No. Okay. So to represent how closely related the financial markets and the good markets are, we rewrite our national income of accounts identity as Y minus C minus G equals investment plus net exports, or savings equals investment plus net exports, and savings minus investment equal net exports. So another name for our net exports is just going to be trade balance. So the left-hand side of the equation, S minus I, that's our net capital outflows. That is how much are we saving in our economy versus how much are other people putting into our economy, essentially. Or how much do we need to borrow in order to invest in our economy. So net capital outflows is the amount that domestic residents are lending abroad minus the amount that foreigners are lending to us. So if net capital outflows is negative, then there is a capital inflow. So more foreigners are putting their money in the United States than the United States is sending out. And so if savings minus investment and our net exports are positive, we have a trade surplus. And if they're negative, we have a deficit. Also, if so savings minus investment and net exports are zero, then there's a balanced trade. So if we're producing more than we're spending, we ship those goods to other countries because we don't want them. We're not going to save them. We hope someone else wants them and we'll buy them. Along with making loans to those same countries so they can purchase our excess goods. Where is this? So this is just one of the case studies in the textbook, which I know all of you definitely read, right?
Yeah.
And it's not lined up nicely with everything else because I guess I decided it fit better here, or maybe I stole it from a different chapter. But essentially what we talk about is how Microsoft doesn't produce everything in the United States. They have to produce things in foreign countries, import them here, sell them here, but then they can always take that money and loan it back to other countries if they so choose. So that little case study actually goes through, what's this unit? Capital flows pretty well, because then it also gets involved in like the mattress industry somehow, because I guess Bill Gates needs a mattress. So the irrelevance of bilateral trade trade balances. So bilateral trade balances, that is the trade balances between two different nations. So basically, if we send Italy 1,000 Fords and they send us 1,000 Alfa Romeos, let's call it an even trade balance. So nations can have a large trade deficit with a few nations, but overall they'll have balanced trade because they might have surpluses with other countries. So when we talk about bilateral trade, that's not the important part. Because overall we can balance everything out through surpluses with other countries. So with an individual, you should be concerned if you are spending more than your income, but you shouldn't be concerned if you don't owe any one particular person. Does that kind of make sense?
Repeat that.
Yeah, so if you're an individual, you shouldn't be concerned, that here in this case, that if you're spending more than your income, the problem is when you only owe one particular person. Wait,
Isn't that the other way
hold
around?
on, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is the other way around, because I reversed should and shouldn't. So you shouldn't be,
So
you should be concerned. You should be concerned if you're spending more than you are making, but you shouldn't be concerned if you owe one particular person money, because if you're overall not spending more than you're taking in, then you're going to be able to take that money from someone else that owes you money and give it to the person who you owe money. That makes sense. We've cleared that up a bit now, I think. But this sentence reads properly?
Yeah. It reads right on here.
Yeah, okay. I shared this very recently, so you should also have it. I just wasn't like an hour and a half ago maybe. All right, so pretty soon we're gonna get into everybody's favorites, graphs. Yeah. So capital mobility and the world interest rate. So if the real interest rate does not adjust to equilibrate savings and investment, what does? That's going to be the question here. So we'll look at different examples from our small open economy. So small is defined as having no particular control in the global economy. So I don't know, let's say the Dominican Republic. They don't have any particular control in the world economy. But if it's a nation like China, if China all of a sudden decides to stop trading with everybody else, that's a big deal. They have a lot of control in the world trade. So residents in this small open economy have perfect capital mobility or access to the world financial market. So they can borrow or lend money to wherever they want. Their interest rate will equal the world interest rate, which is R star. And residents never borrow at a rate above R star, thus the world interest rate determines the rate of interest in that country. Because why would you borrow at a higher interest rate if you could just go to a different country and borrow at the world interest rate? In a closed economy, the interest rate is determined by equilibrating savings and investment, but here we're talking about the world, so therefore the world interest rate is determined by global savings and investment. So the global savings and investment market. Since the world is a closed economy barring international trade. So the world itself is closed because we can't, trade with Mars because there's nothing on Mars except for a couple of dead rovers. But within the world, that's our economy that we're talking about. So why are we going to assume a small open economy? So, first question is, do we count the United States as a small open economy? No. That would be a ridiculous exaggeration because the United States real interest rate is determined because it would be an exaggeration to say that the United States real interest rate is determined by the world, solely determined by the world financial markets. So why do we assume the small open economy? Some countries fit this model, and it helps us to develop some sort of intuition about the system. And we'll talk about a more relaxed model in chapter 13, which is not, so this is what, chapter 6, so it's not 7 weeks away, we skip like a chapter or two somewhere. But we do develop a more realistic, I guess would be the word, model later on. So in this model, the economy's output is fixed. We've already seen that production function. So it's fixed based on capital and labor. Consumption is positively related to disposable income. So if you have more disposable income, you're going to consume more. And investment is negatively related to the real interest rate. Because if the interest rate goes up, you're not going to invest as much. So therefore, our net exports equals Y minus C minus G minus investment, which equals savings minus investment. Because, again, income minus consumption minus government spending, we could say that's taxes or whatever if we're talking about an individual, minus investment. So this is our savings. This is how much we have left over minus investment. So eventually, you'll substitute, and we'll get our net exports equals, this B again. The B is back, that means bar. Remember, we saw that like 3 weeks ago. It means there's a bar over the top. It means it's fixed. I just can't get a bar to show up in Google Slides. So it's Y bar. Is that the only bar? S bar. So those are fixed amounts. So net exports is a fixed income minus consumption dependent on that fixed income minus taxes, minus government spending, minus investment, which is dependent on the world interest rate. So that becomes NX equals fixed savings minus investment, which is still dependent on the interest rate. So the rate here is what kind of brings everything into balance. All right. Our first graph. Though I think we've seen graphs earlier on this semester, right? Or maybe this is the first one, I don't know. All right, so we have our real interest rate. We have investment and savings, IS. This is all on this one axis. So as shown, the world interest rate adjusts to equilibrate savings and investment. So if we have, investment depending on interest rate here, savings is here. So eventually we have this trade surplus because we have more, going in than coming out, leaving than coming in. So this is what the interest rate would be if the economy were closed, but because the world interest rate is higher than that, some other country isn't saving that much money, so you can move your savings into another country that would have had a higher interest rate and bring their interest rate down, but you also raise your interest rate, so you earn more by going abroad. So, as shown, the world interest rate adjusts to equilibrate savings and investment. Investment depends on the real world interest rate affecting investment.
Can we do that one more time?
Yes. Okay. So, this is our small open economy. This is our savings. This is how much the small open economy is saving. This is investment based on the interest rate. So, if this were a closed economy, this is where we would balance, right? But the world interest rate is up here at R star. So why would you loan money at R if you could get R star? So what happens is capital flows occur in such a way that there is a trade surplus. So you're sending out more because it makes sense for you to send your money out of the country to earn a higher interest rate, essentially. And it brings that interest rate up, but that would mean in some other country, their interest rate would have been significantly higher. So their interest rate comes down, and that's again how we're going to balance to this R star. All right, so how policies influence the trade balance. So we have fiscal policy at home, we have fiscal policy abroad, we also have shifts in investment demand. So if we talk about fiscal policy at home, so in a small open economy, again, that's the model we're looking at, if the government increases domestic purchases, it reduces national savings, because the only way they're going to increase that government, it starts crowding out. This is what we talked about, I think, what was it, 2 chapters ago? What was 2 chapters ago? Inflation? No, it was the money system. Yes, it's 2 chapters. So since our net exports is savings minus investment, if savings decreases below investment, the country is now running on a deficit. So money has to come, or capital has to come into the country to balance everything out. So a decrease in taxes has the same effect, since consumption is a function of taxes. So for fiscal policy abroad, small foreign governments changes in fiscal policy has a small effect on the real interest rate. So again here, this is if we're in that country. You're in that country and now all of a sudden you're running a trade deficit. All right, but now another small foreign country, they change their fiscal policy. Does it affect the world interest rate? Not really. So if it's a large foreign government, an increase in spending leads to an increase in the real world interest rate. Again, it's the same concept, we just kind of expand the model here. So here, if the government increases spending, your nation's interest rate goes up. In this other model, if a large nation increases spending, the world interest rate goes up. It's the same thing happening, just on a larger scale. So the increase in government spending, foreignly, I don't think that word is correct, but it leads to a decrease in investment spending in a small economy, leading to a net positive export. Because they've raised the world interest rate, that small economy is going to send their money to higher interest rate nations. Which, again, that world interest rate might be higher than what they could have earned at home. But because they have complete capital mobility, they're going to send it to where they're going to either get the highest highest return on their money, or they're going to pay the lowest interest rate. That's what everyone's going to do in this system. And then we have shifts in demand. So if investment shifts outward at every interest rate, there's higher demand, but if savings is unchanged, investment must be financed by borrowing from abroad. So we'll go back to this for a second. I got rid of these. So we have I and S, we have R, investment as a function of the rate, and this is where we have savings. So we say investment increases at every interest rate. Oh, so this is R. We said R star was like here. But now investment has shifted this way. So now your interest rate in a normal economy, in a closed economy, would have been here if the government increased spending. But now everything has increased. And now let's say here's still where our net exports are. Now we have an R star prime. This is our new R star. Every interest rate has increased because there was a shift in investment demand. But no changes in savings. Savings have stayed constant. Last year I had like 4 different marker colors, so this was a lot more fun to look at. But I think the same point gets made somehow. Make sense? Mostly?
So shifts in investment demand increases the rate.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. So evaluating economic policies. So net capital outflows is the difference between domestic savings and investments. That's what we've already been talking about. That was our net exports. It's the same thing as capital outflows. So policies that increase investment and decrease savings lead to a net capital outflow. Less. Because if savings goes up, the interest rate in your country would go up, but then you'll just go somewhere else and get a lower interest rate. Wait, did I say savings goes up? No, savings goes down.
Wait, so you said that how did you say it? A shift, if an investment demand increases.
Yeah, at every interest rate.
Oh,
Then the interest rates will all go up.
okay.
So here, if savings decreases, interest rates again will go up. So policies that decrease investment and increase savings lead to net capital inflows.
Can you go over, so savings, are we assuming
All right, let's get rid of this.
with a small, yeah, that is so messy.
It's really not.
I'm confused.
All right. So we're gonna go back to our model. Oh wait, do I have a graph of this? No. No, okay. All right. So investment, savings, rates. This is our savings. This is our investment, dependent on the rate. All right, now what was your question again?
I was just confused, when we're assuming that the savings is like decreases, I thought the small open economy, I thought if a small open economy savings decrease, it doesn't affect, it doesn't affect the world interest rate, right?
Not the world interest rate.
Their interest rate.
It would affect what their not R star, because R star is world. Equilibrium, that's the word. It would affect their normal equilibrium rate if there was a closed economy.
Okay.
But so here, if we're saying this would have been their interest rate if it was a closed economy. That's just where supply and demand balance out. But so we're talking about, are we talking about a shift in investment here? No, savings. So we're saying, and then we said somehow along here that there was a surplus. This is R star, right? So here,
What's the trade surplus?
you know, my 10th graders had never seen a symbol like that before. They didn't know what a bracket was. So this is our surplus, and X is surplus. Okay. So here our savings, our money is going out. It's leaving because they're going to get a higher interest rate. So now we're saying savings decreases, so it shifts to the left in this country. So let's say it really shifts to the left, so it's somewhere like here now, as prime. So now here, but R star hasn't changed. R star is still here,
Yeah.
but now money's coming into that country.
Okay.
Does that make sense now?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. A lot of times you have to see
So
it.
then they would have a higher.
Their interest rate is still the world interest rate, but now what's changing is the capital flows. Originally, capital was flowing out of their country into other countries. Now, capital is flowing into their countries.
So before they were an exporting nation, now they're
Imported nation?
Yes, exactly. All right. So policies that decrease investment and increase savings lead to net capital inflows. So we're talking about decreasing investment, increasing savings, leads to an inflow. So analysis is positive, tells us what would happen, not normative. So that's not to say whether it's good or bad, it's just this is what will happen, or what should happen. So economists view trade deficit as a symptom of a problem, not necessarily a problem. So you can have a trade deficit, that's not wrong. But it could mean that a bunch of other things are wrong that you need to kind of fix. So in a closed economy, low investment leads to low future capital stock. This kind of makes sense. If you're not investing in capital now, you can't produce more capital for later. In an open economy, low savings leads to net capital outflow, which needs to be paid later. So developing countries tend to finance most growth through foreign borrowing because they don't have the savings. So they bring money in to build up their investment, essentially, or to balance their investment, their desired investment. We're good so far. See case study, the U.S. trade deficit and why doesn't capital flow to poor countries. So I think last year, what I did was I made a copy of this, handed it out, and told everyone to write an analysis on it for the next week. That's not what I'm going to do. We're not going to do that today. If we have time at the end, what we will do is you'll all read it and then we'll discuss it. But I don't anticipate that we'll have much time. But I know you all have access to the textbook, so maybe it'll pop up later on. All right, exchange rate. So this is the thing that Bella really wanted to be here for. I guess it was the most confusing. All right, so let's get rid of this for a minute. All right, so nominal and real exchange rates. So the nominal exchange rate is the relative price of the currencies of two countries. Again, whenever we talk about prices, it's relative. Or nominal, it's relative. Whenever we talk about prices, it's nominal. All right, exchange rates can be quoted in either currency. So we can either say it's a rise, a rise in the exchange rate is 80 yen to 100 yen is considered an appreciation of the dollar. So instead of getting 80 yen for a dollar, we now get 100 yen for the dollar. So the dollar has appreciated. The real exchange rate is the rate is the relative price of goods of the two countries. So can you still buy more in that other country? If we take price out of it, well, kind of out of it. If we talk about using the US dollar in Canada, can we buy more in Canada than we could have bought in the United States? And has that gone up? So it's sometimes called terms of trade. Real exchange rate equals the nominal exchange rate times the price of domestic goods divided by the price of the foreign good. So if we look at this example here, we have yen equals 80 yen per dollar. The price of a car in America is $25,000, and the price of the car in Japan is 40,000 yen. So what happens overall? What's our real exchange rate here? So we have nominal exchange rate, so it's 80 yen per dollar. Yen per dollar times the price of the domestic goods, that's $25,000 over 40,000 yen. 4 million yen, sorry. I think yen looks something like that, right? Oh, no, it's a Y with the two dashes horizontal, right? Is that yen?
Is that the one?
Maybe. I have a bunch of different symbols up here. So what's 80 times 25, Ben? Someone know? No one knows that off the top of their head?
I'm trying to think out with zeros. It's like,
Well, the front would be 2, right?
Yeah.
So
2 million.
divided by 4 million. So here we get a half. That would be our real exchange rate. All our units somehow go away because we have yen over dollars, but then dollars here, so those go away. And now we have yen over yen, so we just have 1/2. So the real exchange rate and trade balances. Real exchange rate
So
is
does
a,
it mean like 2 cars in Japan with the equivalent American dollars? Or?
you could buy, yes,
Okay.
essentially. You could buy 2, yeah, exactly, just like you said. You could buy 2 cars in Japan. If you took your money to buy 1 American car, you could buy 2 Japanese cars, essentially. Because we're just talking, I guess that would be our because this would be dollars per car. Yen per car. No, those would still cancel out. I don't know. There should be a unit. I guess you're right. It should be per car or cars, whatever. So relative price of domestic goods and foreign goods determines your propensity to buy. I don't know why I spelled it that way. So if the exchange rate is low, then you spend more money domestically, and foreigners are more likely to purchase more of your country's goods because they can buy more of your goods with the same amount of money than they would have been able to buy in their country. Determinants of the real exchange rate. We have the real value of currency is inversely related to net exports. Trade balances must equal the net capital outflow. Savings minus investment is represented with a vertical line with a 0 along the x-axis. So if we go back to a graph, which obviously we all love at this point, made it this far in economics. So we have 0. This is positive, this is negative. Make sense? Net exports with an E represents the net demand for dollars coming from foreigners. So how policies influence the real exchange rate. So we have, again, fiscal policies at home, fiscal policies abroad, and then shifts in investment demand. So if the government increases purchases or cuts taxes, we see that savings minus investment line shifts to the left, lowering the supply of dollars to be invested, and it raises the exchange rate. So let's get rid of, no, we'll keep that. So if savings minus investment, here's our equilibrium exchange rate. E star. E is for exchange rate, by the way. So if we see S, this whole thing decreased, we have now S2 minus I2. E star prime, so the exchange rate has now gone up. Your goods are now more expensive relative to other countries' goods. So anyway, if the government increases purchases or cuts taxes, we see that the S minus I line will shift to the left, lowering the supply of dollars to be invested, raising the exchange rate. What I just said, now I just showed it with, the graph. So fiscal policy is abroad. So a change in a fiscal policy reduces domestic investment, causing an increase in the world interest rate, causing a trade surplus. And then we have shifts in investment demand. So if there is an increase in investment, then there is a trade deficit, reducing the supply of dollars to be invested abroad, and the equilibrium exchange rate will then rise again. So when the dollar appreciates, domestic goods become more expensive relative to foreign goods, and then net exports will fall. Again, it's that same thought. You can just follow that logically. If your exchange rate goes up, no one's going to want to buy your goods because now the price of all of your goods have gone up relative to their own prices if yours is unchanged. Make sense still? Mostly? Okay. So then we have the effects of trade policies. So trade policies are designed to directly influence the amount of goods and services exported or imported. Most often they're used to protect domestic industries from foreign competition. Prime example, we recently saw there was a tariff placed on foreign steel entering this country to protect our steel industry. Countries can do this. They don't often do it that much all of a sudden. It's usually negotiated into trade agreements. Like Canada has really good deals on lumber to protect their lumber industry. That's one of their main exports. That, and I think dairy. So given protectionist policies, there's a shift causing causing imports to decrease, because now it will cost more to import those goods. Causing net exports, this sentence looks funny, hold on. Causing net exports increase, so therefore the equilibrium stays the same, so investment isn't effective. Causing net exports to increase, so therefore the equilibrium will stay the same, and the investment won't be affected by that. While the trade balance stays the same, there's a decrease in total exports. Exports have gone down now. So the determinants of nominal exchange rate. The nominal exchange rate depends on the real exchange rate and the price level in the two countries. Again, real exchange rate, we kind of take price out of the equation. The exchange rates are watched over time, so like is one currency appreciating relative to the other one? So percent change in exchange rate equals the percent change in the exchange rate plus the percent change in P star minus the percent change in P, where P is representing, what does that represent again? Oh, price level, right. Were you reading your hand before?
No,
Oh,
I'm sorry.
but then also from that we get the percent change in the exchange rate equals the percent change in the exchange rate plus our inflation changes. So real exchange rate, percent change in nominal exchange rate, sorry, I want to say this exactly, equals the percent change in the real exchange rate, so that's again taking price out of the equation, plus the difference in the inflation rates of those two countries. That's what the pie is. That's what we talked about whenever we talked about inflation. So if a country has a high level of inflation relative to the United States, we will buy more foreign currency over the course of time. We'll skip over this one as well. Purchasing power parity. So a good cannot sell for a different price in different locations at the same time. Especially, well, it used to be able to happen that way because it still can happen to an extent, but we have a lot more free-flowing information nowadays, so we know and it's easy to ship things. But, so, what we're saying is you can't buy wheat in Chicago for $10 a bushel and sell it in New York for $25 a bushel at the same time, because the prices have to be equal. So this would lead to an increase in the price in Chicago, because everyone would start demanding Chicago wheat, it's cheaper, but then the price in Chicago would go up. And the supply in New York would also go up, because they're shipping that wheat to New York now, but if there's an increase in the supply, then the price would have to come down. Arbitrage, which is what we call this, buying things for a low price and reselling it at a higher price somewhere else. It leads to the leveling of international prices. Everything kind of just starts balancing out once we move goods from one place to another. And this does not apply to goods that are not easily mobile. So you can't like pick up a factory from the middle of Illinois and move it to New York. And it doesn't apply to consumer preference. So maybe New Yorkers prefer, I don't know, wheat from Georgia. If you're selling Chicago wheat, they're not going to want it. Okay. So I guess wheat preference doesn't come into play that often.
Isn't that kind of what drop shipping is, when you buy it really cheap from another country and sell it here?
Well, it's arbitrage.
So,
Yeah.
okay, so it's essentially a new form of arbitrage then.
Yeah, but then their prices will go up, and our prices will come down. And we've all heard about the Big Mac. We have the Big Mac index, so this is used to track the exchange rates kind of in a real sense, like how many Big Macs can you buy given a US Big Mac. So there's a nice little chart in the book that it has, like the country, the the price of a Big Mac in that country, and then the predicted exchange rate based on the prices, and then it gives you the actual, well, as of whenever this book was published, 2012 or something, the actual and predicted exchange rates. And they find generally they're pretty consistent, or pretty close, generally, not always. But it's just like a nice little index to use sometimes. All right, and then we have the United States as a large open economy. So the United States is large enough that it can influence the world financial crisis. Again, we produce a lot of stuff, we purchase a lot of stuff. And capital is not perfectly mobile across countries, so funds and capital do not flow freely. We don't have complete and total capital freedom and mobility. So we must combine our knowledge of the small open economy and a closed economy to analyze the United States, which we're going to get to, again, like I said, in chapter 13. That's still a little bit beyond what we're at. And I know a lot of you that read this chapter, you were probably all like, oh my god, this is the last section in the chapter. No, it's not. There's an appendix that's very important, and that's what we're going to talk about. I know. Wait, what time is it?
450.
Oh, okay. All right, so we have the large open economy. So here we start talking about capital outflows. We're going to introduce a lot more graphs here. We eventually will come up to a 3-graph model that we need to know to see how it influences everything. So the key difference between a small open economy and a large open economy is the behavior of net capital outflows. So in a small economy, capital flows freely into and out of the open economy at the international interest rate of R star. So capital flows in the amount that the domestic investors lend abroad minus the amount lent into the country from abroad, which we've already kind of talked about a little bit. The higher the interest rate you find domestically, the less likely you are to invest internationally. Because again, you're getting a higher return in your own country. Similarly, the foreign investors will invest in the United States if the interest rate is higher in the United States than in their home country. They're going to want to send their money to wherever they can get the highest return. Net capital flows to other countries is denoted as CF, capital flows, which is negatively related to the real interest rate. As interest rate rise, less funds flow abroad, and more capital is sent into the United States. So now we're acting as if we're the United States. So capital flow is equal to capital flow dependent on the rate, which can, again, either be positive or negative. Similar to this concept here, we have positive or negative. All right. So if we look here, this is kind of what we're talking about. We have our real interest rate. We have net capital outflows, so this is money is leaving the country, going somewhere else for a higher interest rate. Or here, we might be borrowing because our capital outflows are less than zero, so we have capital inflows, essentially. So in our closed economy, there's no outflows, there's no inflows. Everything is just as it is. In a small open economy, capital can flow however way it wants to get to R star. So there are two reasons that the United States isn't fixed by the world. The United States is large enough to fix the world interest rate, or not fix, but influence